My beloved child, something happened quietly last night, and what makes it meaningful is not where the meeting took place, but why your name became part of the conversation. Imagine two people sitting across from each other, speaking carefully, neither of them realizing at first how honest the night was about to become. One was the person you love. The other was someone closer to your world than you might expect, someone who has noticed things about you that you rarely explain aloud. And when the conversation finally turned toward you, the person you love did not begin with a confession or some dramatic declaration. They began with a question. A surprisingly simple question. Do you think they know? For a moment, the person across from them did not understand. Know what? That was when the atmosphere changed. The person you love looked away, searching for words that could carry something they had apparently been holding inside for longer than they wanted to admit. Don't skip this moment, because the important part is not a secret designed to shock you. It is something much quieter, and perhaps much more revealing. They wanted to know whether you had noticed the small ways their feelings had been showing through, the conversations that lasted longer than necessary, the moments when they almost said something and stopped, the strange distance that sometimes appeared precisely because they cared more than they knew how to express. And the person close to you listened without interrupting. That silence invited something deeper to emerge. Your person admitted that being around you had begun changing the way they thought about connection. They had expected affection to feel obvious, easy, almost predictable. Instead, what they felt around you seemed to make them examine themselves. Why did your absence become noticeable? Why did certain words from you remain in their mind hours later? Why did they sometimes rehearse conversations with you before those conversations ever happened? They were not asking for certainty. They were trying to understand their own heart without rushing it. And then the person close to you said something they were not prepared to hear. Maybe you're trying so hard to understand the feeling because you're afraid of what happens when you finally acknowledge it. The room became quiet again. Not uncomfortable. Just honest. Stay till the end, because this was where last night's conversation moved beyond curiosity. The person you love finally admitted there was something they wanted to tell you directly, but they had been waiting for the perfect moment. They worried that saying too much could change the natural connection between you. They wondered whether you were ready to hear what they had been slowly realizing. And strangely, the person close to you did not tell them what to do. Instead, they asked another question. When you imagine never telling them, does that feel easier? Your person could not answer immediately. That hesitation said more than a quick response ever could. Because sometimes the clearest realization arrives when someone asks us to imagine remaining silent forever. Suddenly, all those carefully protected words begin to feel heavier than the possibility of speaking them. Something important is waiting for you here. Your person began describing what they actually admired about you, and it was not the obvious thing. It was not simply appearance, charm, or chemistry. They spoke about the way you continue carrying warmth even when you have reasons to become distant. They remembered a small moment when you probably thought nobody was paying attention. Something you said. Something kind you did without making it important. Apparently, they remembered. And according to the conversation unfolding last night, that ordinary moment became one of the reasons they started seeing you differently. But then came the unexpected part. The person close to you revealed something about you too, not a private secret, not anything that betrayed your trust, but an observation your person had never considered. They explained that you may notice far more than you openly acknowledge. That your quietness does not necessarily mean you are unaware. Sometimes you simply give people room to reveal themselves without forcing an answer from them. Your person became still after hearing that. Because suddenly another possibility entered their mind. What if you already sensed what they had been trying so carefully to hide? What if some of those unfinished sentences had never been invisible to you at all? And then they asked the question that changed the direction of the entire conversation. If they already know, why haven't they said anything either? The answer they received was gentle, but it stayed with them long after the meeting ended. Maybe this isn't about who speaks first. Maybe it's about whether both of you feel safe enough to be honest when the moment arrives. That sentence softened something. There was no dramatic promise afterward, no impossible prediction about what must happen next. There was simply a person realizing that meaningful connection cannot live forever inside assumptions. Eventually, two people have to meet each other in honesty. And before last night ended, your person said one final thing about you, something they had apparently never admitted this clearly before. But that was also the moment the person close to you interrupted them with a realization neither of them had expected, and what followed is where this conversation becomes far more personal than it first appeared. There was a pause before the next sentence, the kind of pause that appears when someone realizes they are about to say something that cannot easily be taken back. The person close to you leaned forward and quietly said, "Before you tell me what you feel, answer something else." When did this person stop being just another person in your life? That question caught your person completely unprepared. They had been ready to describe you, ready to explain the connection, perhaps even ready to admit what they wanted, but they had never traced the feeling back to its beginning. And suddenly, last night became less about what they planned to do next and more about understanding what had already happened inside them. They searched through memories, conversations, ordinary encounters. Little moments that would look insignificant to anyone watching from the outside. Then one memory surfaced. It was not dramatic. You probably would not even identify it as important. Yet somehow, your person remembered exactly how you looked, what you said, and most importantly, how they felt afterward. You had treated them with a kind of understanding they were not expecting. You did not demand an explanation. You did not try to impress them. You simply made space for them to be themselves. And something about that stayed. That was probably when it started, they finally admitted. But the person close to you smiled slightly and replied, "No. I think that was when you noticed it." And suddenly there was another silence. Don't skip what happened next, because this was where your person began connecting moments they had previously kept separate. Perhaps the feeling had been forming much earlier. In the way they instinctively looked for you, in how naturally they wanted to tell you certain things, in the strange comfort of hearing your voice after a difficult day, in the fact that even small disagreements with you mattered more than they should have. None of those things alone proved anything. Together, however, they painted a picture your person could no longer dismiss so easily. They admitted something quietly, they had tried to reason their way out of the connection. Not because they wanted to lose it, but because genuine feelings introduce uncertainty. Caring means there is something worth protecting. And when someone becomes meaningful, suddenly timing matters. Words matter. Silence matters. Your person had been cautious because they did not want to turn something beautiful into something pressured. That was when the person close to you said, "Then stop trying to create the perfect moment. Just create an honest one." Your person looked down. That sentence landed differently. For perhaps the first time that night, the conversation was no longer about whether feelings existed. It was about whether those feelings deserved expression. Stay a little longer, because what followed revealed something even more personal. Your person asked what you had said about them. Not what you felt, because nobody could honestly answer that for you, but whether you ever mentioned them differently. Whether your expression changed. Whether their name carried some invisible significance when it entered a conversation. The person close to you refused to speak on your behalf. Instead, they gave an answer your person was not expecting. If you want to know what is in their heart, you should hear it from them. That answer could have ended everything. Instead, it seemed to give your person relief. Because somewhere beneath all the questions, perhaps they never truly wanted someone else to reveal your feelings. They wanted the chance to discover them with you. Slowly. Honestly. Without someone else writing the ending first. And that realization changed the purpose of the meeting. Your person stopped asking, "Do they feel the same?" and started asking, "How do I tell them what they mean to me without making them feel responsible for my feelings?" That is a very different question. It is the question of someone beginning to understand that affection is not about obtaining a particular answer. It is about having enough courage and respect to offer the truth while leaving another person free to meet it in their own way. Something important is waiting for you, because the person close to you then noticed something your person had not noticed about themselves. Every time they spoke about you, they kept returning to the future. Not grand promises. Small pictures. A conversation they hoped to have. A place they thought you would enjoy. Something funny they wanted to show you. A quiet day they imagined sharing. Tiny possibilities, and your person had unknowingly placed you inside them. "Do you hear yourself?" the other person asked. Your person looked confused. "You keep talking about them as though you expect them to still be there." That realization seemed to stop everything for a second. Because perhaps this was what they had been afraid to admit. Their feelings were not only attached to memories of you. Somewhere along the way, you had begun appearing in their imagination of what came next. Not as an obligation. Not as a certainty. Simply as someone they hoped would remain. And then your person finally said the sentence they had been trying to reach all night: "I don't want to keep pretending they're ordinary to me." The person close to you did not respond immediately. They allowed those words to exist without rushing past them. Then they asked one final question, and this question changed your person's expression completely. "So what are you going to tell them?" Your person smiled, but before answering, they reached for something they had brought with them. Something small. Something connected to you. And when they placed it on the table, the person sitting across from them immediately understood why this meeting had really needed to happen. What appeared on that table was not expensive, dramatic, or designed to impress anyone. That was precisely why the person close to you became so quiet when they saw it. It was something connected to a memory your person had kept, an ordinary reminder of a moment between you that apparently meant far more to them than you ever realized. Maybe you had forgotten the moment completely. Maybe, for you, it had been nothing more than a passing conversation, a small kindness, a simple exchange that disappeared into the rest of your day. But your person had carried its meaning forward. And last night, when they placed that reminder between themselves and someone close to you, they finally admitted why. Every time I see this, I remember how different everything felt after that day. The person across from them studied their face, because suddenly there was no need to ask whether this connection mattered. The answer was sitting right there, not in the object itself, but in the fact that your person had preserved the memory attached to it. Then came an unexpected question: does this person know you kept it? Your person shook their head. And somehow that tiny answer revealed the entire pattern. There were things you had never been told. Not because your person was playing a game, and not because some enormous secret was being hidden from you, but because they had been experiencing the connection privately before finding language for it. They remembered more than they showed. They noticed more than they admitted. They cared about moments that you may have assumed passed unnoticed. Don't skip this, because what happened next shifted the conversation again. The person close to you asked, "Are you meeting me because you want permission to tell them?" Your person immediately said no. Then they stopped. Because perhaps some part of them had wanted reassurance, not permission exactly, but confirmation that speaking honestly would not destroy the closeness they already valued. The person across from them understood. "You can't ask me to guarantee their response," they said gently. "But you can decide what kind of person you want to be when you speak." Those words changed something. Your person had spent so much energy imagining outcomes that they had almost forgotten the simplest possibility. An honest conversation did not need a perfect ending to be meaningful. They could tell you what had been growing inside them without demanding that you instantly define what happened next. They could speak without pressure. They could allow you room to think, to feel, to respond naturally. And suddenly, the fear surrounding the conversation became smaller. Not gone, just smaller. Stay till the end, because this was when your person said something about you that even the person close to you had not expected. They make me want to be clearer. Not more impressive. Not more mysterious. Clearer. Your person explained that before you, they had become comfortable leaving certain feelings unfinished. If something mattered too much, silence sometimes seemed safer. If a conversation became vulnerable, they could retreat into ambiguity. But with you, that habit no longer felt satisfying. Something about your presence made half-spoken truths feel incomplete. They did not want you guessing forever. They did not want meaningful moments buried underneath uncertainty. And perhaps most importantly, they did not want their hesitation to make you believe you were unimportant. The person close to you listened carefully before saying, "Then that should be part of what you tell them." Your person looked surprised. Tell them that your silence wasn't emptiness. Tell them you were trying to understand yourself before asking them to understand you. There it was, the sentence that seemed to bring the entire night into focus. Because sometimes what looks like distance from the outside is actually someone gathering the courage to become emotionally precise. Of course, only the two people involved can discover what the connection truly means. But last night, your person appeared to reach one grounded realization: they could no longer expect you to interpret what they had never clearly expressed. Something important is waiting for you, because after that realization, the conversation became practical. Your person began thinking about what they would actually say if they were sitting across from you instead. No rehearsed speech. No dramatic declaration. They wanted the first words to sound like themselves. They tried one opening and immediately rejected it. They tried another and laughed because it sounded too formal. The person close to you laughed too, and for a moment all the intensity disappeared. Then, almost accidentally, your person said exactly what they had been searching for. I think I'd just tell them that they've become important to me, and I don't want to hide behind vague words anymore. Silence returned. But this time it felt peaceful. The person close to you nodded. Start there. Your person took a slow breath, looked once more at the little reminder on the table, and something in their expression settled. The meeting could have ended there. In fact, both of them seemed ready to leave. But then the person close to you remembered something you had once said casually, long before this secret meeting ever happened. They hesitated because they had promised themselves they would not speak for you. Yet this particular memory was not a confession of your feelings. It was simply a sentence you had once spoken about love, timing, and what you wished people understood about you. And when your person heard those words repeated back to them, everything they had planned to say to you suddenly changed. The sentence was so simple that, for a moment, your person did not understand why it affected them so deeply. The person close to you remembered you once saying that the most meaningful connections are not always the loudest ones. Sometimes what matters most is knowing that someone can be honest with you without turning honesty into pressure. You had not been speaking specifically about your person when you said it. There had been no hidden declaration inside those words. It was simply something you believed about closeness, trust, and the way two people should be able to meet each other as they truly are. Yet when your person heard it last night, something inside the conversation suddenly became clear. They had been preparing themselves to deliver the perfect message, searching for the perfect phrase, imagining every possible response, when perhaps what mattered was much simpler, telling you the truth gently and allowing the moment to breathe. So I don't need to explain everything at once, they said. The person close to you shook their head. Maybe you only need to say what is true right now. And that changed the entire plan. Your person began removing all the complicated sentences they had mentally rehearsed. No grand promises about a future neither of you could predict. No attempt to define your connection before you had spoken together. No expectation that you would immediately know what to say. Just one honest beginning. Don't skip what happened next, because your person then admitted what had really been delaying them, and it was not rejection. It was the possibility that you might misunderstand their silence. They wondered whether you had interpreted their hesitation as indifference. Whether moments when they stepped back had made you think they were moving away emotionally. Whether their effort to protect the connection had accidentally made the connection harder to understand. What if they think I never cared? They asked. The person close to you did not rush to reassure them. Instead, they answered with something far more useful. Then give them information they never had. Those words seemed to settle into your person slowly. Because you cannot rewrite another person's interpretation of yesterday, but you can bring greater clarity into tomorrow. And your person finally understood that if there had been confusion between you, the answer was not more guessing. It was communication. Something important is waiting for you here, because the conversation then moved toward one particular moment between you that your person had misunderstood too. They described a time when you became quieter around them. At the time, they wondered whether your feelings had changed. They considered asking you about it but stopped themselves, afraid of making something ordinary feel unnecessarily serious. So they did what people sometimes do when uncertainty becomes uncomfortable: they created an explanation privately. Maybe you needed distance. Maybe they had said something wrong. Maybe the connection had meant more to them than it meant to you. Yet last night, the person close to you offered another possibility. Did you ever ask? Your person went silent. No. They had not. Then you don't actually know what that moment meant. And there was the realization neither of them had expected to reach. So much of the uncertainty surrounding you had been built from unanswered questions rather than actual answers. Your person had been reading pauses. You may have been reading theirs. Each of you could have been protecting something while interpreting the other's caution as distance. Of course, nobody sitting at that table could know what was truly happening inside your heart. That belongs to you. But your person suddenly understood something about their own behavior. They had been asking silence to provide answers that only conversation could give. Stay a little longer, because this was when their tone changed completely. They stopped talking about what they hoped you might feel and started talking about what they could genuinely offer. Patience. Clarity. Respect. The willingness to hear your answer rather than imagine it. The willingness to let whatever exists between you develop at a pace that feels natural for both of you. And perhaps that was the most mature thing said all night. Real connection is not strengthened by predicting another person's heart. It grows when two people become safe enough to reveal their own. Your person looked again at the small reminder they had placed on the table earlier. This time they picked it up and held it for several seconds before putting it carefully away. I think I know what I want to say now. The person close to you smiled. Then say it to them, not to me. Your person laughed softly, but behind that laugh was something different now, a calmness that had not been there when the meeting began. They had arrived looking for answers about you. They were leaving with clarity about themselves. Yet the night still had one final turn waiting. As they stood to leave, the person close to you asked them to wait. There was one last thing they believed your person needed to understand before approaching you, something about the way you respond when something truly matters. Your person sat back down. What is it? They asked. The answer came quietly. If you speak to them, don't only pay attention to their first words. Your person looked puzzled. And then the person close to you explained why your first reaction might not reveal everything you are actually feeling, and why giving you a little space after the conversation could become the most important part of what happens next. The explanation caught your person off guard because they had been imagining your response as a single moment. A look, a sentence, an immediate answer that would somehow reveal everything. But the person close to you understood something subtler about you. When something truly matters, you may not always rush to fill the silence. You may listen first. You may carry the words inward, examine what they mean, notice what they awaken, and only then decide how much of yourself you are ready to reveal. So if they become quiet, the person close to you said, don't automatically decide what that quiet means. Your person stared at the table. That advice seemed almost perfectly designed for everything they had been learning that night. They had spent too long interpreting pauses as conclusions. Now they were being reminded that your first expression might simply be the beginning of your processing, not the end of your answer. And something softened in them. They realized they did not need to walk into a conversation with you expecting an instant resolution. They could speak honestly, then give you the same space they had needed to understand themselves. That realization made the possibility of talking to you feel less like a dramatic crossroads and more like what it should have been all along, two people finally allowing themselves to communicate without pretending they already know what the other person is thinking. But then something unexpected happened. Your person asked, "Do you think they'll be surprised?" The person close to you smiled, but did not answer immediately. That hesitation made your person lean forward. "What?" they asked. The answer was careful. "I think you might be surprised by what they have already noticed." Your person became completely still. Don't skip this, because no secret about your heart was revealed. No private confidence was betrayed. Instead, the person close to you pointed toward something visible that your person had somehow overlooked. They reminded them of the way you sometimes remember details from conversations long after everyone else had forgotten. The way you noticed changes in their mood without making a spectacle of it. The way certain moments between you seemed to carry an extra second of silence. As though both of you recognized something meaningful but neither wanted to name it too quickly. None of that guaranteed romance. None of it could tell your person what you felt. But it suggested something important. Perhaps your connection had not been happening only inside their imagination. There had been real moments between you. Real attention. Real conversations. Real reasons for both of you to wonder what those moments meant. And suddenly your person stopped looking for certainty and began appreciating possibility. "Maybe I've been trying to know the ending before we've even had the conversation," they admitted. The person close to you nodded. Exactly. Some connections become confusing because people attempt to solve them privately instead of experiencing them together. They imagine every outcome, rehearse every sentence, analyze every glance, and eventually become exhausted by a story that has barely been allowed to begin. Something important is waiting for you, because last night your person finally decided they did not want to do that anymore. They wanted reality instead of endless interpretation. They wanted to hear your voice rather than the version of your voice they had been creating inside their thoughts. They wanted to understand what you actually felt comfortable sharing instead of guessing from fragments. And above all, they wanted you to know one thing regardless of what happened afterward: your presence had mattered to them. More than they had shown. More than their hesitation might have suggested. Your person stood again, but this time they did not look uncertain. They looked thoughtful. Grounded. Almost relieved. The person close to you walked with them toward the door, and for several seconds neither spoke. Then your person stopped. "There's still one thing I haven't told you," they said. The other person turned around. "What?" Your person hesitated, then admitted something that explained why they had chosen last night for this meeting in the first place. Apparently, something had happened recently between you, something so small that you might not have realized its effect. A sentence you said. A choice you made. A moment when you behaved exactly as yourself, without trying to send any hidden message. And somehow that moment convinced your person that continuing to remain vague was becoming unfair to both of you. Stay till the end, because this is where last night's meeting revealed its true purpose. Your person had not secretly met someone close to you merely to talk about feelings. They had gone there because they were considering doing something different. Speaking to you sooner than they had originally planned. Not with a dramatic confession. Not with an expectation. Simply with honesty. The person close to you asked when. Your person gave a small smile. Soon. But first I need to make sure I say the part that matters most. And what part is that? For several seconds, your person said nothing. Then came the words they had apparently been unable to form at the beginning of the night. I need them to know they never had to prove anything to become important to me. The sentence changed the atmosphere completely. Because beneath every question, every hesitation, every remembered moment, that seemed to be the truth your person had been circling. You had not become meaningful because you performed perfectly. You had become meaningful through ordinary moments of being yourself. And perhaps that was why they had struggled to explain the connection. It had grown naturally before either of you had been given a clear definition for it. The meeting finally ended. Your person stepped away carrying the same small reminder they had brought in, but with a very different understanding of what it represented. Yet just before they separated, the person close to you called their name one last time and asked a question that stopped them in their tracks. Before you tell them how you feel, are you prepared to tell them why you disappeared emotionally that one time? Your person's expression changed instantly. Because there was one chapter of this story they had avoided discussing all night. One moment of distance that may have confused you more than they ever realized. And now, if they truly wanted honesty between you, they knew they could no longer leave that part unexplained. For the first time that entire night, your person did not immediately try to find the right words. The question had touched the one part of the story they had carefully walked around, because explaining why they became distant meant admitting something about themselves that was far more vulnerable than simply saying they cared about you. They turned back slowly and said, I didn't disappear because I stopped feeling something. I stepped back because I realized I was feeling more than I knew how to handle. The person close to you remained quiet. No interruption. No attempt to rescue them from the admission. And in that silence, your person continued. They explained that there had been a particular point when the connection stopped feeling casual to them. Before that, they could enjoy your presence without questioning everything. They could speak naturally, walk away, continue with their day. Then something shifted. Your words began staying with them. Your absence became noticeable. Small misunderstandings suddenly mattered. They caught themselves caring about how you interpreted them. And instead of moving closer, their first instinct had been to create a little distance so they could understand what was happening inside themselves. What they never considered was how that distance might have looked from your side. Don't skip this, because the realization that followed was perhaps the most important one of the night. They might have thought I was losing interest, your person whispered. The person close to you answered carefully. Maybe. Or maybe they had their own reasons for becoming quiet. You won't know until you talk. Again, there was no pretending to know your heart. No invented certainty. Just the reminder your person had needed repeatedly. Assumptions cannot replace conversation. Your person nodded, but something in their expression suggested they were replaying that period differently now. They remembered messages they almost sent. Conversations they shortened because they were afraid their feelings would become obvious. Moments when they wanted to move closer but convinced themselves that waiting was wiser. At the time, restraint had felt protective. Looking back, they could see how easily protection could resemble indifference when nobody explained what was happening. And then they said something remarkably simple: "I wish I had just told them I needed time to understand myself." That sentence carried no drama, only clarity. Sometimes one honest sentence could prevent weeks of uncertainty. Stay with this moment, because the person close to you then asked, if you could return to that exact day, what would you say differently? Your person closed their eyes for a second. When they answered, their voice was softer. "I'd tell them, if I seem quieter, please don't assume you've done something wrong. I'm trying to understand why this connection matters so much to me." And there it was. The explanation they had never given you. The missing piece that could make certain memories look completely different. Not because it proved what you felt, and not because it guaranteed what happens next, but because it finally revealed what had been happening on their side. Something important is waiting for you, because after speaking those words aloud, your person made another realization. They did not only owe you honesty about how they felt now. If they wanted a genuine conversation, they needed to acknowledge the confusion their previous behavior might have created. Not with endless apologies. Not by turning the past into something heavier than it needed to be. Simply by saying, "I know I became difficult to read, and I should have communicated better." The person close to you smiled. "That sounds more like you." Your person laughed quietly. "Maybe the version of me I'm trying to become." That small exchange changed the energy again. What had started as a secret meeting filled with questions was becoming something else entirely: preparation for emotional responsibility. Your person was no longer searching for a magical sentence that would guarantee your response. They were learning how to arrive before you without hiding behind ambiguity. And then something happened that neither of them expected. Your person reached for their phone. For a second, the person close to you assumed they were checking the time. Instead, your person opened something they had written earlier, a message addressed to you that had never been sent. They stared at it for several seconds before admitting, "This is what I almost sent." The person close to you did not ask to read it. They simply asked, "Why didn't you?" Your person looked at the screen and smiled faintly. "Because it says everything except what I actually mean." That answer revealed more than the message itself ever could. Your person had apparently written around the truth. Careful words, friendly language, enough warmth to suggest something, but never enough clarity to let you understand. And now, after everything discussed last night, that old message no longer felt right. So your person did something symbolic. They did not send it. They deleted it. Not because the feeling had disappeared, but because they wanted their next words to come from the person they were now, clearer, calmer, and less afraid of being understood. Before leaving, they began composing something new. Only one line at first. They read it silently, changed a word, stopped, then locked the phone without sending anything. "Not tonight," they said. "I don't want this conversation to begin because I'm caught in the emotion of this meeting. I want to speak when I can truly listen to them too." That decision surprised the person close to you, but they respected it. Because patience, in that moment, was not avoidance. It was intention. Your person wanted to approach you when there was room for both voices, not simply unload everything they had discovered about themselves. They finally stepped outside, and the meeting truly seemed finished. Yet as they walked away, their phone remained in their hand, and the unfinished new message remained waiting. It began with a sentence so different from everything they had written before that even your person seemed surprised by it. There were no mysterious hints. No complicated explanations. Just a direct opening that could finally change the kind of conversation the two of you had been having. And before they went to sleep last night, they returned to that message one more time and added a second sentence, one that revealed exactly what they hoped would happen when you finally sat down together.